My name is Isabel Torres. I'm 36 years old, and for the past 3 days, I've been sitting next to my 11-year-old daughter's hospital bed without moving more than a few steps away. Luna's head injury has left her unconscious in the ICU. Tubes and machines are keeping her stable while I sit in a vinyl chair, counting her breaths and whispering promises she might not even hear. My legs ache, my eyes burn, and my heart is split in two. When my phone rang, I thought maybe it was the neurologist with an update, or maybe my brother Leon checking in. But no, it was my father. Your brother's award ceremony is tomorrow evening. The governor will be there. I expect you to speak during the family remarks. For a moment, I thought he was joking. I stared at Luna's pale, still face, then at the glowing screen. Dad, I can't. I'm at the hospital. Luna hasn't woken up. His reply came cold and sharp. She's in the care of professionals. There's nothing more you can do by sitting there, but your presence tomorrow matters, for this family's image. That word, image, that's always what it boiled down to with my father. I ended the call with trembling hands and pressed delete contact without hesitation. The sound of silence after that felt heavier than anything I've ever known. Where are you watching from today? Hit like and subscribe to hear what Luna said when she finally opened her eyes. On the same night, my father accepted his precious award. Growing up in a sun-bleached neighborhood just outside Santa Fe, I learned early that image wasn't just important in our house, it was everything. My father, Victor Torres, was a decorated colonel who spent 30 years commanding soldiers and demanding perfection. At home, he brought that same rigid control into every corner of our lives. Our shoes had to be lined up precisely, our posture corrected mid-dinner. Our emotions? Tucked away neatly, never shown in public. Weakness was not tolerated. But even within that military fortress of a household, there were favorites. My younger brother, Leon, was the golden boy. Always camera-ready. Always charming. He had a natural flair for performance, first in theater, then in broadcast journalism. My father bragged about him constantly. "That's my son," he'd beam, pointing to the television when Leon read the evening news. A man with ambition. I wasn't jealous. At least, not in the traditional sense. I never wanted the spotlight. I wanted something quieter, realer. I wanted to help people. But in my father's world, helping people didn't count if it didn't come with medals or media attention. When I told him I was dropping out of law school to pursue a master's in social work, he didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. When he finally did, it was just to say, "You're wasting your potential. You could have been someone." "I am someone," I wanted to say. "I just don't need a stage to prove it." But I never said that out loud. Instead, I let him believe I'd failed him. And maybe part of me still wanted his approval, despite everything. Maybe that's why I kept attending family events, nodding along when he boasted about Leon's ratings or criticized my lack of progress. And Leon, he never spoke up, never defended me. He'd just chuckle and sip his wine, his smile always camera perfect, even when no cameras were around. Still, I tried to keep Luna connected to her grandparents. I told myself that family was complicated, and maybe one day things would get better. That if I just kept trying hard enough, something would shift. But now, sitting in this hospital room, watching machines breathe for my little girl, I realized something I should have known years ago. Nothing I ever did would be enough for my father. And maybe that was no longer my burden to carry. It was a Thursday afternoon, one of those ordinary spring days that sneak in between chaos, offering you a breath of peace right before the storm hits. Luna had just come home from school, her backpack slung over one shoulder, a few stray paint smudges on her sleeves. She was always painting, always seeing color where others saw blank space. That afternoon, she was brimming with excitement. "Mom," she said, "can I go sketch by the river trail? There's this bend with the light hitting the rocks just right. I want to get it down before sunset." I hesitated. The trail was only 3 blocks away. It wound behind the community park and looped along the edge of the dried riverbed. Quiet, peaceful. But still, she was only 11. "Phone fully charged?" I asked. She nodded. "Smartwatch on?" Another nod. And you check in every 30 minutes. No exploring off trail. Yes, ma'am, she replied with a little grin, mimicking my tone. Scout's honor. I watched her leave from the porch, that sketch pad tucked under her arm like treasure, her silhouette shrinking down the sidewalk in the soft, golden light. That was the last moment of peace I had. At 5:11 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Is this Ms. Torres? The voice on the line asked, shaky, strained. We found your daughter. There's been an accident. She's being taken to Santa Fe General right now. Everything after that became a blur. I remember my keys slipping from my hand as I tried to lock the door. I remember nearly running a red light. I remember parking crooked outside the ER and sprinting inside like a madwoman. They wouldn't let me see her right away. There was a head injury, the nurse said gently. She's in imaging now. The trauma team is evaluating swelling in the brain. She was found unconscious. Swelling in the brain. Those words felt like they didn't belong in the same sentence as my daughter's name. Luna, my Luna. She was just going to draw a picture. How did this happen? The hours that followed moved like molasses, thick with dread. I sat in a hard plastic chair, hands shaking, phone vibrating with messages I didn't have the strength to read. I stared at the emergency room doors, willing her to come walking through them, sketchpad in hand, saying it was all a mistake. But that miracle never came. Instead, a surgeon came out, mask still on, eyes lined with fatigue. She's stable, he said. For now. But we've placed her in a medically induced coma to reduce the swelling. The next 48 hours will be critical. That word again. Critical. They let me see her after that, and nothing could have prepared me. She was so still. The machines beeped in rhythms I didn't understand. Her small hands that had once painted galaxies on our apartment walls, were limp at her sides. Her sketch pad had been found nearby, ruined by water and dirt. I reached for her hand. I'm here, baby, I whispered, the words cracking in my throat. You hold on. I'm not going anywhere. And I meant it, no matter what happened, no matter what anyone else said. I would not leave my daughter's side, not for a party, not for an award, not even for my father. By the time the second night fell over the ICU, I had forgotten what sleep felt like. I hadn't left Luna's side except for a few brief moments to splash cold water on my face or sip bitter coffee from the staff lounge. Every muscle in my body ached from the stiff recliner. Every second that ticked by without her opening her eyes felt like a new kind of torment. The nurses, God bless them, had stopped asking if I needed to rest. They brought me warm blankets, protein bars, and sometimes just sat nearby in quiet solidarity. Their compassion filled the spaces my family had left glaringly empty, because no one had come. Not my father, not Leon, not even a single text from my brother. Not a voicemail from my father asking how she was doing. Nothing. Until the call came. It was just past midnight. The hospital was hushed except for the soft murmur of machines and the low buzz of fluorescent lights. I was holding Luna's hand, whispering about the river trail, telling her how her sketchpad was waiting at home, when my phone buzzed on the armrest. Dad lit up on the screen. My throat tightened. My first instinct was relief. Finally, I thought, he's reaching out. He wants to know how she is. Maybe he's had time to reflect. Maybe he realized what matters. I stepped just outside Luna's room to avoid disturbing her. The hallway was dim and still. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it thumping in my ears. I pressed answer. Dad, I said, my voice hoarse with exhaustion and hope. Thank you for calling. I just spoke with the MC for tomorrow's event, he interrupted, his voice clipped and precise. We've finalized the seating chart. Leon's going to mention your name during his thank you speech, so it's important that you be there. Be sure to wear something appropriate. It took me a moment to process the words. Wait. What? Leon's ceremony, he repeated as if I were being deliberately slow. It's his moment, and as a family, we show up for each other, especially in public. We expect you to be there no later than 5. My mouth went dry. Dad, Luna's still in a coma. I understand that, he said, and I could hear the impatience creeping into his voice like an old, familiar thundercloud. But sitting there all night won't change her condition. You've done your part. Doctors and nurses are trained for this. You being in a chair doesn't fix anything. I gripped the edge of the wall to keep from collapsing under the weight of his words. She hasn't woken up, I said, fighting to stay calm. She has swelling in her brain, internal bleeding. She's 11 years old, Dad. She could die. There was a pause on the line, brief, hollow, meaningless. That's tragic, he said, his tone unbothered. But life goes on, and Leon's worked very hard for this. You don't want to ruin it for him by making it about you. Make it about me? The sentence ricocheted through my skull like a cold blade. Is that what you think this is? I asked, my voice trembling. Me making this about myself? It's not the first time, he snapped. You always find a way to create a spectacle when attention isn't on you. You did it at your mother's memorial service. You did it when you quit law school. And now, again, when your brother's finally being honored for something important, you're playing the victim. I almost dropped the phone. A nurse passed me in the hallway, casting a concerned glance my way. I turned my face toward the wall, trying to breathe, trying not to scream. You don't get to do this anymore, I said finally, my voice quieter now, but sharper. You don't get to twist my pain into selfishness. You don't get to reduce Luna's condition to a scheduling inconvenience. And you sure as hell don't get to threaten me into attending a ceremony while my daughter lies unconscious in a hospital bed. Victor didn't respond at first. Then came the voice I'd heard since childhood. Cold, measured, dangerous. Isabel, if you're not there tomorrow, don't expect another dime from me. The inheritance, the emergency account, Luna's college fund, I'll shut it all down. And just like that, I understood. This had never been about Luna. It had never been about love or support or family. It had always been about control, about obedience, about image. The same rules from childhood still applied. Comply or be discarded. I stared at the wall, the paint chipped at the bottom corner, the fluorescent lights flickering above. Somewhere behind me, my daughter fought silently for her life, and my father was threatening to cut her off, not for anything she had done, but because I refused to abandon her. My voice came out steadier than I expected. You know what, Dad? Do it! What? Cut me off, rewrite the will, close the accounts, take it all back. But don't call me again, don't text me, and don't you ever show up at this hospital unless you come with an apology, not a threat. I didn't wait for his reply, I hung up. Then, with shaking fingers, I opened my contacts, scrolled to his name, and deleted it. It was only a tap of a button. But in that tap, I severed decades of fear, manipulation, and silence. And for the first time in my adult life, I chose myself. I chose my daughter. And somehow, amid the sterile halls of a hospital echoing with machines and grief, that choice gave me the first flicker of peace I'd felt in years. After I ended the call with my father, I stood alone in the hallway, staring at nothing, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant chime of an elevator arriving on another floor. I should have felt triumphant, liberated even. I had finally stood up to the man who had ruled over my life like a warden in his perfectly pressed uniform. I had defended my daughter, drawn a clear boundary, chosen what truly mattered. But all I felt was hollow. When I returned to Luna's room, the beep of the monitors welcomed me back like a lullaby of dread. Her chest rose and fell in slow, assisted breaths. Her eyelids still didn't move. Her fingers remained limp in mine. I took my seat again and whispered, I did it, baby. I told him no. I chose you. I'll always choose you. But doubt started its slow creep into the corners of my mind. What if I'd made a mistake? What if Luna needed that college fund? What if I'd let my own pride get in the way of her future? The weight of every possible what if settled on my shoulders like wet cement. I stayed up through the rest of the night, watching her face, searching for the tiniest twitch or furrow, anything to suggest she was fighting her way back to me. But her face remained still, serene in a way that felt unnatural, as if she wasn't just asleep, but somewhere far beyond my reach. At dawn, a nurse named Carmen came in with soft eyes and a tray of hospital breakfast that I had no appetite for. She knelt beside me and placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "You need to rest, Isabel. Just a couple hours. Your body's going to shut down if you don't." I shook my head without speaking, but Carmen wasn't done. "You won't help Luna by collapsing. Let me sit with her. I'll be here every minute. If anything changes, anything, I'll come get you myself." I wanted to resist. I wanted to believe I was being strong. But maybe strength also meant letting someone carry you for a moment, so I agreed. I took the change of clothes someone had dropped off the night before and went to the hospital's family shower room. The water was lukewarm, but it felt like baptism, washing off the layers of grief, fear, and guilt that had clung to my skin. When I returned to the ICU, I felt a little more human, though still nowhere near whole. And then my phone buzzed. Again. "Leon!" I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart already tightening with dread. I answered, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know if there was even one person left in my family who remembered Luna was the one in crisis. "Hey," I said, voice cautious. "Morning," Leon replied, his voice smooth and polished as always, as if he'd just finished recording the morning segment. "Look, I know there's a lot going on, but did you really hang up on Dad last night?" I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. "You're seriously calling me about that? Luna's in a coma, Leon." "You remember Luna, your niece?" There was a pause. "Of course I remember. Things got messy, and now he's threatening to cut you off. I figured I could help mediate." I let out a bitter laugh. "Mediate? You mean talk me into showing up at your little ceremony to keep up appearances?" He hesitated again. "It's not just about appearances. It's about family, about unity." "No," I snapped. "It's about control. It's about Dad needing a perfect image for his perfect son on his perfect day. And anything that doesn't fit that image gets erased, including me. Including Luna." "Come on, Isabel," he said, his tone dipping into condescension. "You always make things so dramatic." I nearly dropped the phone. "Dramatic?" I whispered. "You want to talk drama? Try watching your daughter hooked up to machines, wondering if she'll ever wake up. Try choosing between a party and your child's life. Then talk to me about dramatic." "I'm just saying. You could have compromised," Leon muttered. "An hour at the ceremony, a speech, then back to the hospital. He would have let it go." I closed my eyes, every muscle in my body tightening. "I'm not a compromise," I said slowly, clearly. "And Luna is not a prop. If you can't understand that, then you never really saw me at all." I ended the call, and for a long time, I didn't move. I just sat there, beside my sleeping daughter, tears slipping silently down my cheeks, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of cutting ties with the only family I had left. The hospital moved in slow, sterile rhythms. Monitors beeped, IVs dripped, and nurses flowed in and out like quiet sentinels, keeping time in a space where time had lost its meaning. After the call with Leon, I turned off my phone completely. I couldn't take one more message from someone telling me to see reason or show up for family. The only reason that mattered was lying unconscious in the bed beside me. Luna hadn't changed much since the previous night. Her vitals were stable, and according to the nurses, that was a small victory. But she still hadn't woken, still hadn't moved. And every time I looked at her, I saw more than bruises. I saw the possibility of never hearing her laugh again. Around noon, Detective Mendez arrived. I blinked at the sight of a man in plain clothes holding a notepad at the nurse's station. His presence seemed out of place. Wrong, even. Hospitals are built around healing. Cops are built around the aftermath of damage. "Ms. Torres?" he asked gently. "I was assigned to look into the circumstances surrounding your daughter's injury." I felt my throat tighten. "You mean, it wasn't just an accident?" He offered a careful nod. "We can't say for sure yet. But there were some inconsistencies at the scene. Her smartwatch data doesn't match the exact location she was found, and a neighbor reported seeing someone parked near the trail around the time of the incident. The floor seemed to shift beneath me. "All this time," I whispered, "we thought she just fell." "I'm not saying that's impossible," he interrupted gently, "but we want to be thorough. Your daughter's well-being may depend on it." He asked me to recount the afternoon. What Luna was wearing, what she carried, what time she left. Every detail felt suddenly monumental, like any piece might unlock a truth I didn't want to face. "She had her sketch pad," I said, "and colored pencils, and the blue sweatshirt she always wears when she draws outside. It has paint on the sleeves." "She was alone?" I nodded. "Her friends don't really go to the river trail. It's more her sanctuary. Her place." He scribbled something into the notepad, then glanced up at me with careful eyes. "Did she have anyone in her life who might have made her feel uncomfortable? Any unusual behavior lately? Someone following her?" The question felt like a punch to the lungs. "No," I replied too quickly, then paused. "At least, I don't think so. She's private, quiet, but nothing that ever raised red flags." He left me with his card and a promise to keep me updated. And just like that, another weight dropped onto my chest. Not only had Luna nearly died, now there was a chance that someone had done this to her. I returned to her bedside and stared at her face, so peaceful, so motionless, and wondered what she had seen in those last seconds of consciousness. Did she fall? Was she running from someone? Did she try to scream? And then came the guilt. I had let her go alone. I had told myself it was safe, that she needed her space, that she was old enough, that it was just a sketching trip. Now every justification felt like a betrayal. The nurses assured me again and again this wasn't my fault. I had done everything right, but nothing they said could erase the horror of that moment. The call, the ambulance, the blood on her hairline. And the worst part? Someone might have meant to hurt her. The rage that followed was unlike anything I'd felt before. It wasn't the quiet, tired frustration I felt with my father. This was fire. It was primal. Maternal, violent. If someone had touched my daughter, had harmed her, had followed her, stalked her, shoved her, then God help them, because I would burn every last bridge, break every last law, if it meant protecting her. For the next several hours, I sat on high alert. The ICU had never felt more vulnerable. Every stranger in the hallway looked suspicious. Every creak of the door had me turning sharply. The nurses tried to calm me, but I couldn't shake the growing sense that we weren't just recovering from an accident, we were recovering from an attack. And in that whirlwind of emotion, as my eyes burned and my fists clenched, and the machines hummed beside me like distant thunder, I heard it. A sigh. Soft. Barely audible. I turned to Luna's face. Her lips parted slightly, her eyelids twitched. I leaned in, heart racing. "Luna? Baby?" And then, her fingers moved, the smallest tremble. But I felt it. I stood up so fast the chair screeched behind me. "Nurse!" I shouted into the hallway. "She's moving!" Carmen rushed in, followed by a second nurse. They checked the machines, adjusted the monitors, and within seconds, the room had transformed into a flurry of controlled urgency. "She's responding," Carmen said, a smile breaking across her face. "We need to page Dr. Yates, now." And just like that, the tide began to turn. Luna, my Luna, was coming back, not all at once. Not with dramatic music or movie-perfect awakenings, but with the slow, stubborn defiance that defined her since the day she was born. And as they called for the doctor and prepared for further evaluation, I stood by her side, hand over hers, whispering the same words over and over. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." The hours that followed Luna's first flicker of movement were filled with the most exquisite kind of torture. Hope, fragile and bright, tangled with fear that it might vanish as quickly as it came. Dr. Yates arrived within minutes of the nurse's call, his expression more alert than I'd ever seen it, the weariness of night shifts pushed aside by the sudden change in Luna's condition. He examined her carefully, flashlight in hand, watching her pupils react. He called her name softly, asked her to squeeze his fingers, and she did. Not with strength, not yet, but with intent, with will. It was the first time I'd seen his features soften into something close to joy. "She's fighting," he said to me gently. "This doesn't mean we're in the clear, but it's a very good sign. If she continues to respond, we'll begin the process of tapering off sedation entirely." The rest of the day blurred, but in a different way than before. I wasn't paralyzed by fear now. I was anchored by anticipation. Every minute I spent by her side, I whispered stories into the hush of the ICU. I told her about the time she refused to eat vegetables unless I arranged them into flower shapes, about how she once sold crayon portraits to the neighbors for 50 cents and declared herself a businesswoman. I told her that the world needed her, that I needed her, that no award ceremony, no family feud, no old war general's pride mattered more than this moment, this breath, this miracle. And then, around 8:15 that night, Luna opened her eyes. Just a crack at first, the kind of thing you could mistake for a reflex. But then they blinked, then shifted, and then they settled on me. Her eyes, wide, glassy, still hazy from medication, searched my face as if piecing together a puzzle from the far side of a dream. I forgot how to breathe. "Hi, baby," I choked out, gripping her hand. "You're safe. You're in the hospital. I'm here." Her lips moved, dry, trembling. She tried to speak, but the tube in her throat silenced her. "Don't try to talk," Nurse Carmen said quickly. "We'll get the doctor." They evaluated her, and within the hour, Dr. Yates gave the go-ahead. The respiratory team removed the ventilator tube with expert efficiency, and though Luna's throat was raw, her very first whisper was the only thing I needed to hear. "Mom?" My knees buckled. I leaned down, pressing my forehead to her hand. "I'm right here," I said. "I never left." She blinked slowly. "My head hurt." "I know, sweetheart," I said, brushing her hair back gently. "You've been through a lot. But you're safe now." She swallowed hard, wincing. "What happened?" I paused, unsure how much to say. "There was an accident. You hit your head. You've been asleep for a few days." Her brows furrowed. A tremor crossed her lips. "No," she whispered. "Not accident." I sat upright. My heart went cold. "What do you mean, Luna?" Her voice cracked. "Someone was there. Man!" I stared at her, pulse racing, a pit opening in my stomach. "You saw someone?" She nodded slowly. "I heard footsteps behind me. Then, everything got blurry. I tried to run." Carmen stepped forward. "We need to get the detective." I squeezed Luna's hand. "You did everything right. You're safe now. He can't hurt you." Tears spilled from her eyes as she whispered, "I dropped my sketchbook." I smiled through the flood of emotion that nearly drowned me. "We'll get you a new one, the best one. But what matters is you're back." Moments later, Detective Mendez returned to the hospital. I stepped into the hallway with him as the nurse took Luna's vitals again. "She remembers someone was following her," I said, my voice trembling. "She tried to run." He looked grave, flipping open his notepad. "That lines up with our neighbor's statement. She described a silver pickup parked near the trail, engine still running. We've traced it to a man with a prior assault charge from out of state. We're working on a warrant." Rage surged in me again, sharp, uncontrollable, protective. "He came after a child," I said, trembling. "He tried to silence her." Detective Mendez nodded solemnly. "And she lived. She'll testify." "That makes all the difference." When I returned to the room, Luna was drowsy but awake, her fragile body curled beneath the hospital blanket, her eyes tracking my every step. "Will he come back?" she asked, barely louder than a breath. "No," I said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Not while I'm breathing." I sat beside her for the rest of the night, holding her hand in silence. Outside, I knew the ceremony was underway. The photographs, the applause, the carefully crafted speeches about legacy and excellence. But in that hospital room, something far more extraordinary was happening. A girl had survived. A mother had refused to abandon her. And for the first time, I no longer cared who noticed. 3 weeks after Luna opened her eyes, she stood, wobbly but determined, at the end of our apartment hallway, one arm braced against the wall, the other gripping my hand. Her hair had grown uneven from where they shaved part of her head during surgery, and her favorite sweatshirt now hung a little looser from the weight she'd lost. But her gaze was steady, her steps stronger each day. "That's 5 steps today," I said with a smile I hadn't worn in a long time. "You're showing off." She grinned weakly. "Maybe just a little." Each milestone in her recovery felt like a reclamation, not just of her body, but of our life. Her speech returned, her drawings returned, and eventually, the laughter returned too. The man who had followed her, assaulted another girl 2 towns over, was caught and arrested after Luna's description, and the neighbor's testimony led to his identification. He was now awaiting trial. Luna wouldn't need to testify, her statement was enough. But she wanted to. "I don't want him to hurt someone else," she told me quietly one night. And in that moment, I saw her father in her, the same quiet courage, the same conviction that doing the right thing mattered, even when it was hard. As for my family, silence bloomed like frost across every bridge. I didn't try to rebuild. My father never called again. Leon sent one hollow message days after the ceremony. "Hope Luna's feeling better." I didn't respond. But strangely, I didn't feel alone. Support came from where it mattered. Luna's school, our neighbors, the nurses who checked in long after their shifts ended. People who didn't care how polished my shoes were or how I spoke into a microphone. People who showed up when it was dark and ugly and unfiltered. That was the real legacy I wanted my daughter to inherit. Not one of image and obligation, but of integrity and love. We celebrated Luna's 12th birthday a month later. It was quiet. Just a few friends, some cupcakes, and a surprise visit from her art teacher who brought a brand new sketchbook wrapped in purple ribbon. Luna's eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen since before the accident. "I'm going to draw the hospital first," she said softly, "so I don't forget that I came back." Later that evening, as we sat on our tiny balcony watching the light fade behind the New Mexico horizon, Luna leaned against me, her head tucked under my chin, her voice small but steady. "Are we going to talk to Grandpa again?" I took a long breath. The question I had known would come, the one I had prepared 100 answers for and still feared. "I don't think so," I said gently. "Not for a while. Maybe not ever." "Because of the party?" I turned and looked at her, this girl who had survived pain she didn't deserve, who now stood at the fragile edge of healing. "Because he didn't choose you when it mattered," I said. "Because family doesn't just share your blood. They share your burdens." She was quiet for a while, then whispered, "I think that's okay." And it was. In that silence between us, I felt the final thread of guilt snap. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in peace. Letting go wasn't the same as losing. Sometimes, it was the only way to make space for something better. 1 year later, Luna was back in school full-time. Her limp was barely noticeable now. Her therapist said she showed uncommon resilience. I called it stubborn brilliance. I had taken on more freelance photography work, capturing real people in real moments. Nothing curated, nothing fake, just truth. Sometimes messy, always beautiful. We had less money, fewer guarantees, but more laughter, more light, more us. And when Luna came home one afternoon holding a flyer for an art competition and asked if she could enter, I smiled, knelt beside her, and said, "Whatever you create, I already love it." Because she was mine, and I was hers. Not perfect, not wealthy, not accepted by the legacy-driven dynasty I'd been born into, but finally free. Sometimes we're taught that family is everything, but what they forget to say is this: family that demands your silence, your compliance, your abandonment of self, is not family. Love without conditions is not weakness. It is strength beyond measure, and choosing to stand by your child, even when the cost is high, is not selfishness. It's legacy, it's healing, it's freedom. So tell me, have you ever had to walk away from the people who should have stood beside you? Have you ever drawn your own line in the sand and said, no more? If this story resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, sometimes the family we choose is the one that saves us.